But your relationship with Tony Waddington was really special, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Couldn't get any. I don't believe there's a player in the history of football who got on like with a manager like I did.
Yeah.
And it was just, I suppose, because coming from Chelsea and the way they treated me and the way the manager treated me at the end, Dave. I like Dave, but he treated me terribly at the end. Him and the chairman.
Did Tony have a good rapport with a lot of the players there? Was he a good manager, or was it just extra special, the relationship?
He tried to, but they didn't want it. They were. I think a lot of the problems with Tony was that half the team were local lads, and Stoke being such a small place,
it's a cliquey place.
Yeah, and they were, and they probably looked at me as a
Cockney, yeah.
Well, they did. You know, yeah.
Which you were really, Al.
Well, no, everybody in our dressing room was like that at Chelsea, you know. But that was this cool
fucking good-looking, suave and flash at that age, Al. Come on.
But you know, it's it was something in a dressing room. It's, you know, I'd never had it in a dressing room where you had to fight against your own players. I was lucky that the manager was on my side, and he put all his eggs in one basket and bought me. He wanted to buy Osgood. If we'd have bought Osgood, that would have been great. It would have been better off. He took the load off me and put it on him, because he'd have been fighting all.
Do you think that could have been the player that made that team into a championship winning team, Osgood?
Oh, absolutely. And I think had the thing with the roof not fell off and we had no money, I think we'd have gone on and we'd probably won the European Cup.
It was a good team at the time.
Well, he was the icing. Osgood was the icing on any cake, you know, because you know you hear in the modern day. I heard them talking after the game yesterday about Man City. Where do Arsenal go now? You know, if they had an Osgood, they wouldn't have to go anywhere. Osgood was the.
Why wasn't he used so much for England? I mean, I read the bit in the book where, you know, like Geoff Hurst came on before Osgood in the 1970 World Cup and stuff. Well, why did they not use him so much?
Well, that's $1 million question there, because Alf Ramsey must have been the only person that see it that way, you know. Because when they picked the 1970 squad and he was going to Mexico, he'd had his best season ever. As even after breaking his leg, they said he was going to be a better player before, but he wasn't. He was a fabulous player. He was the best in England. And now, the man that won the World Cup couldn't see that. Yeah. And I think he was blinkered.
Do you think Alf suffered a little bit of coming from one era into another era with football, with the change of tactics and some style of play? Do you think Alf was set in his ways because he won the World Cup and he was a bit of an old
Well, the worst thing, I always say the worst thing could happen to Alf was winning the World Cup. I mean, what he'd done in '66, would he have won the World Cup in another country, we would never know. It's something we would never know, it's a mystery. But he had Alan Ball, Bobby Moore, Bobby Charlton, Gordon Banks. Alan Ball said Ray Wilson was the best player, so I'll go with him. He had 5, you know, then.
Yeah, real world-class players.
Really world-class players.
Jack
We would have got in any team.
Yeah, outstanding
Jack
players.
yeah. Well, Jack was, you know, that. But
he stiffened up the back 4, old Jack, didn't he?
Well, you know, if you say the other, you know, them 5 players would have got in any team in, you know, even the Brazilian team with that won it in 1970, you know, they were just majestic, weren't they? But Osgood would have got in that team because they didn't have a centre forward like Osgood. And Osgood could play like the Brazilians. He could pick it up to even go past. Jimmy Greaves could have got in that team, although he weren't in that team.
I know he was an injury risk at the time, wasn't he? For that game, I think he'd had stitches or was he Greavesy?
Jimmy, yeah, but I still think that Alf.
Would you have fancied him put him in?
I think I'd have took a chance with Jimmy.
Yeah, because he was an exceptional player, Jimmy Greaves, when he last. It'd have been worth taking a chance on, wouldn't he? Do you know what I mean? I know, you know, it's been proven that he made the right choice, really, Ramsey, with us winning. But you know, if you watched Jimmy Greaves, and I watched him as a kid, and I've watched a lot of stuff about Jim, and he was an exceptional star, wasn't he? He was a very talented footballer.
I think, you know, to look at his face when we won and how disappointed, and It turned him to this. It definitely turned him.
Yeah, turned him to the drink a little bit.
You know, it does. It did with me to a certain extent, but it didn't make me drink more. It just put a sour drink in it, sour taste in it. But with Jimmy, you see at the end of it, he's disappointed, but it wasn't disappointed of the man that was injured, that he was left out.
Yes.
You know, he was kind of discarded for lesser players, and that he was as good as anyone in the world at that time. As well.
I don't think you were too much of a fan of Geoff Hurst, were you, who replaced him? Because you played with Geoff at Stoke, didn't you?
Well, Geoff was he was my Sir, and Dame Judith was mine. Yeah, I love Dame Judith to look after me when I lived with Geoff, but he turned out when he took over manager at Chelsea, he didn't want me there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a downside to that, but you can't knock his plan ability. What he done in '66 was phenomenal.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you see today, in the modern day, the money they're getting and these players, what the fees on their head, and you see Geoff Hurst in the World Cup, no one's ever mentioned it, but the goals he scored, I bet he never missed a chance. I bet he only, if he scored 7 goals, the hat-trick and the free kick, the other one against Argentina, if he scored 6 goals, I think he only had 6 chances, and he took them all.
Yeah.
In the modern day,
they wouldn't have had a stats thing then, but I bet it would have been interesting to see.
I can't remember him missing a chance.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's a sign of a great player, and he was a great player. Even when I got to Stoke, he was over the hill, but he was still his presence. He's still done everything right. He was a terrific forward. He was a fantastic forward. Although we fell out and everything else, I Jeff, you know what I mean.
Was that over the sort of the West Ham way that he wanted to do something in that style?
Who, Geoff?
Yeah.
No, I think the way, because Geoff was a wing half at West Ham, they couldn't find a position for him but Ron Green would see something in him, and he just liked him so much, and he was so keen to be a player. I think he moved him up front, the last resort, and he threw him up there. Geoff had big, broad shoulders, very hard to knock off for any defender. In training, he wasn't the greatest athlete in the world. He had to work hard at his fitness, and it paid off. And he was in the right place at the right time. And Bobby Moore knew where to pick him out when he made them runs. If they didn't play for West Ham together, we would never have won the World Cup.
Yeah, that connection paid dividends.
2 free kicks he put down and just put in that space, and Geoff just went. I mean, if they didn't play for the same club, we would have probably been talking about we done well, got the quarterfinals maybe, you know.
Bobby Moore was a class act, wasn't he?
Absolutely, absolutely the best, the greatest captain, international captain ever.
Did he have that kind of like star quality when you were around him?
Yes, they called him God. Everyone called him God, you know, and that summed it up. But he was.
It was a tragedy he didn't get recognised by the FA and respected more, because what an ambassador he would have been for England. Do you know what I mean? Such a good man, but they do say, I watched a documentary the other day, and they seem to think the thing where he was at the World Cup and he got accused of stealing, that hanged over his head a little bit. Do you know what I mean? But whether that was with them. Well, that's what they were saying.
Well, they actually done that to him in Bogota.
They did. They set him up. Yeah.
Well, they ignored it. They ignored him. The great story was when Jimmy Greaves went to see him, wasn't it? When he was under house arrest. Yes. You know, the FA didn't even go and see him. Ramsey didn't go and see him. I'd have took the whole team round there and
sat with him.
Yeah, absolutely, because he was innocent. And you know, it was obvious that there was a get-up, and you know they poisoned Gordon Banks. You know. Yeah. That's not coincidence, is it? You go all them miles and he's like booking in a hotel and that. Us 4 going away. You're Robert Yorrick. I mean, you know, we're all ill.
I'm sure you
and
told me
the only
before.
Ones
They messed about with Bonetti's head before that.
Well, they did.
Well.
Yeah, that was a report. English reporter done that. He, you know, said something about phoned Peter in the morning and he was all over the place. Something about his missus was messing about with someone and. Don't know if it's true. don't know if it's not true, but you don't. They're the kind of things you don't do today.
Did he ever recover from? He stepped in for Gordon Banks and let in those goals. I mean, did that taint his whole career? Because that's what people associate it with now.
I think in 70. I don't know how old was he then, Peter? Was he 30 something?
30s,
yeah. I think the only way was, I mean, he played for about another 8 years in the first team, but I don't know how you cater for that. I mean, how do you you live with that? But was it his fault, you know?
Yeah, well, like you said, if his head was a bit all over the place anyway with what they'd done to him that day. Do you know what I mean? It's
well,
still
the thing I knew about Bonetti was the first goal of Beckenbauer. That was his breakfast. You know, he would never let that in.
Yeah.
Didn't you play with Franz Beckenbauer was it in Seattle Sounders?
No, I played against him.
Oh right, okay.
When he was in New York, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like?
Well, it's always a pleasure, isn't it, to be on the same field. I mean, he'd done it all then and gone to New York. To play against New York was a pleasure. Just not him, Shinaglia and Bogajevic and all that lot.
Who was playing there at the time? Any other big names now? Pelé weren't there then, was he?
No, Pelé was gone. Cruyff was actually at LA then, but he'd been at Cosmos. They had Carlos Alberto.
Wow, Carlos Alberto.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they had. I think
they were sort of a bit like the Harlem Globetrotters of football, weren't they?
That's what they were. That's what they should have actually took them all around the world. Yeah.
Speaking of Cruyff, there's the Cruyff turn, but isn't there the Hudson drawback?
Hudson dragback, is it?
Dragback, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, we can't demonstrate it now.
That's how I used to snatch my drink before closing time. Just before the shutters went down, you go bang.
It was funny.